Good day. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. It's Friday, June the 9th, and we've got CEO Gabriel Rene of VERS AI joining us. VERS is a cognitive computing company specializing in next generation artificial intelligence solutions. VERS has had a lot of news flow since we first met with them 3 months ago, and Gabe is here to bring us up to speed what's going on with VERS, as well as the entire AI market. Give us some context for that, because AI seems to be driving much of the stock market, bull market we're in right now. And he's going to give us some context for what this all means for the market as well as VERS. But remember, this is neither recommendation or investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Gabe, how are you doing? Great to have you back here. And boy, the whole market's been, I think it was smoldering in the background. And then everyone was like, Chat GPT, what do we do with this and that? And then over the last couple of months, it's really caught the retail investor on fire. And we're seeing evidence from that with NVIDIA, like their market cap is hitting $1 trillion, but that's driven off of exploding demand for their chips, as that's got to run these AI server farms. So I guess just broadly, give us some perspective on what you're seeing in the overall market in AI.
Great. It's good to be here, Martin. It's nice to see you. Thanks for having me on. The AI space has exploded in part because what's happening here is almost what you could think of as software 2.0, right? For the last 30 years or so, we've been the ones doing the computing, right? We kind of have to be the main interface. You have to, provide your instructions. You have to manage your interactions. You got to search for the things you want. And what's happening with artificial intelligence is really this next wave where AIs and AI agents are able to start to take over a lot of those workloads, whether that's the search part, providing you direct answers in the case of something like Chat GPT or Google's Bard. So instead of going to a search engine, asking for questions and having to sort of hunt and peck, we used to call it surfing the web, but it's a little bit more like spelunking for data or scuba diving for information. Instead, these AI agents, which they're starting to bolt to the front end of Google's search engine or Bing in the case of Microsoft, are just providing the answers directly, sort of eliminating the need for you to search. You can ask follow-up questions. You can ask for clarifications. You can ask for a metaphor. You can ask for examples. This is really powerful, and it's starting to now shift all the way into even software development. In fact, in the case of NVIDIA, the CEO came out, Jensen Huang, last week and said, we've entered a new age where programming is going to be available for everyone because it's not going to require some sort of learning of an arcane software language. You can just use natural language, and the AI agent itself will start to essentially assemble resources for you, even to the point where we're starting to see user interfaces and generative UI instead of just generative AI start to come forward here. So it's really driven a new sort of arms race for every industry. Every major Fortune 500 company that even isn't based on AI or selling AI is asking themselves, how do we use AI? How do we adopt this optimization horsepower, integrate it into our products and services before our competitors do, and we lose our edge?
Yeah, and it's causing a lot of, let's say, anxiety, existential angst with politicians and people. It's like, hey, is my job going to be okay? You'd think typically artists would be the ones, the content generators would be safe, but we've got fake Drake out there and all the other people that we don't even need them. And it sort of ignited the politicians like, hey, how do we control this? How do we not make it too disruptive too quickly for society? And you've actually put out some news releases on that, on sort of how does it work, and then some thought leadership with that. Can you maybe talk about what your thoughts are of that space and some pathways maybe for the industry to go?
Yeah, so even as the power of AI and the potential of AI has captured the industry and the financial markets interest, it's also certainly captured the interests of regulators and government leaders and the big law firms out there that are trying to make sense of everything from how do we translate laws into something, autonomous vehicles that are powered by AI can understand the rules of the road and obey with those, all the way to how do we really control these systems at massive sort of planetary scale. And we've seen, real concerns, especially given the approach that the big tech companies, their approach to making artificial intelligence has some negative byproducts. One of those is because it crawls public data and reuses that data. We're seeing a wave of lawsuits, copyright infringement, IP infringement. The Drake example is one example where, the record label's not happy that someone could just generate a song that sounds exactly like a Drake song. And I'm sure Drake is not that happy either that he's not getting any revenues or royalties, or in fact that he's easily replicable. It actually sounded pretty good for those of you who haven't heard it. So that's on one side. You have, misinformation, you've got bias in these systems, you've got fraud, everything that you might imagine would occur if you just crawled the public web, that certainly has some of our best ideas out there, but also some of our worst ideas, and turn that into a giant statistical model. And so this is a problem because it means that we really can't trust these systems to say the right thing or even provide us with correct and accurate information. If you're just generating some text, for marketing copy, maybe you can edit that. If you're a kid and you're doing an essay in school, maybe you don't get caught for the fact that it puts in a quote from someone that they didn't say. But when you really start thinking about how this is going to drive critical systems, infrastructure, really physical systems like vehicles, and being used to do credit analysis and provide loans for people, you're really seeing the regulators start to panic. And so what's happened in just the last couple of months is the EU, the United States, the G7 have all come out and essentially proposed some variation of what we could call AI acts. And these AI acts are now being considered as law in everywhere from Congress in the United States down to Australia, that more or less are asking for a handful of things. One, we'd like to be able to see notifications, disclosures when AI is being used for something that the rest of us might be interacting with. That's probably likely to come through in the US here pretty quickly. The bigger ones that we're looking at are around explainability. And so in the case of the AI Act, there's a new Article 68C. This article specifically says that if you or I or anyone else feels they've been, that's a EU citizen, has been harmed by a decision that an AI may have made. So you didn't get that loan, you didn't get the house, you didn't get the job. You get to go to the regulator and say, hey, the deployer of this, let's say in this case, it could be Equifax, uses GPT-4 to build some sort of credit worthiness AI-powered system. Well, if it can't explain the decision-making process and the data that went into that, which of course they can't because these AIs are giant black boxes, the fines are anywhere from 10 to 30 million euro per incident, or 2 to 6% of your global revenues. And so the EU is quite serious about ensuring that the safety and explainability of these systems are paramount. So we started working on an industry report with Dentons, the largest law firm in the world, really calling for global standards for how these things model information, ensure that that information is human interpretable, and that the activities that they have inside of physical things like cars and drones and robots are actually governable, the ability to limit what they can do in physical space, including causing certain harms. And so this, we announced that last Monday. There's an executive summary that's on our website today at versus.ai, and you can sign up to get that long form report, which is expected to come out later this month, which is really, the first description of a path to global AI governance that isn't just a wish list of things, but an actual articulation of the standards, which, by the way, Versus has been developing for the last 3 or 4 years in partnership with the IEEE, who's one of the largest standards organizations in the world, standardized Bluetooth and Ethernet and Wi-Fi. And so we think this is the standards-based path really cuts through the market-driven road where a big player might sort of capture the market, or governments taking lots of different patchwork quilt approaches to trying to regulate AI, and instead says, here's a global standard, just like Wi-Fi works everywhere you go in the world. We should have these standards for AI so that we have things like explainability, interpretability, and governance built into them.
Well, and that's typically the way industries want to work. They would rather have a self-regulatory structure as opposed to some politicians crafting some legislation that may have great sound bites, but not actually be may actually be counterproductive or just be nonsense, but it has a snazzy name to the bill title.
Right.
They can say that, hey, look what we did. So you're working with the IEEE to set together a framework for this. Are there technology limitations or requirements? Because like you were saying, it's a black box. If you're like, hey, give me a credit score on this, and you don't know how you're getting ranked on different things, or if they're taken where you went to elementary school as, oh, kids from that neighborhood are bad luck or bad risk profiles. Is there a technology or structure that needs to be implemented to allow some explainability to be put in?
Yeah, great question. So what we've been developing for the last half a decade is something called HSML. It's a hyperspatial modeling language, and it's an explicit modeling language made for artificial intelligence that is able to explain the underlying logic and relationship between objects and activities in spaces. And so you can use this to act as sort of an explainability layer that can be added on top of things like these large language models and these black boxes that doesn't change them from black boxes, but creates a sort of transparent layer on top that does the interpretation, that can be queried, that can be human interpreted, and can be updated or even corrected if needed, which is not the case with these black boxes today. So it's really about adding kind of like a governor or regulator. I don't mean that in the political sense, like I mean more like on a vehicle or something that's managing the flow and capabilities of data as it's moving back and forth between these systems.
All right, so you have like a technology framework around it, and have you put a lot of work into actually building out the code or the technology actually to run that?
So all of VERS's technology is built on that. Okay. And so, we've been developing these standards for several years. I mean, we were kind of Noah, in the middle of the desert, putting this giant ark together when there was no rain, and everyone thought, oh, these guys seem kind of smart, maybe a little crazy. And then all of a sudden the floods started coming, and now people are looking to us as the ones with the ark. And so there's plenty of room. We'd like everyone to be able to come aboard here. But all of VERS's technology, including our KOSM platform, is built on the proto versions of these standards. We've even been deploying them with the European Commission over the last 3 years with a pilot project called Flying Forward 2020, where VERS's has been at the heart with our KOSM platform and our AI agents guiding the activities of AI-powered drones in 5 different countries, translating the laws literally in 5 different languages to something that AIs can understand, where they can fly, where they can't fly, how high, how fast, and being compliant with the regional restrictions and regulatory definitions within each of those regions. So this is not theoretical. This is being applied today, and everything that we build at VERS's is already built on these standards. So our goal is that next year, as the IEEE moves to approve these, that these become the de facto standards for AI explainability, interoperability, and governance globally.
With OpenAI and Google, I guess, being the leaders, arguably, but there are lots of players in there. In terms of a market opportunity for you, could you license it to them, or you'd be more just sort of thought leaders and sort of help clear the way for the direction of the industry? How would your sort of technology and thought leadership sort of benefit VERS's shareholders?
Well, I think both of those are true, but there's also a third option. In that scenario where you're Equifax and you'd like to use the horsepower of, say, Google's Bard or GPT-4. I mean, in reality, no one's going to use one AI system for everything. We're going to end up with these multiple different AI systems. Some are good at different things. Some are good at vision. Some are good at text. Some are good at audio. Some may have corpuses of data that are more relevant in certain specialized domains, and others might be great at sort of general information like GPT-4 is today. So what you want is a sort of a governor, orchestrator agent like the kind that we're building that can be that sort of interpretation layer between the context under which it's operating, in this case, maybe credit scores, and the various data resources and compute horsepower that are coming from AIs. So yes, OpenAI or Google, could license the technology from us, or translate their technology into the standards, making it, more, making them able to comply. But also all of the developers who are really the ones on the hook for those large fines are more likely to want to use us and can still use them. So suddenly we act as this sort of orchestration layer that has baked in, guarantees around privacy and security and legal compliance.
So you'd be like a middle layer between, like, part of the wholesaler. Okay, we need this information. We're going to get some from this API, and that you'll collect,
yes,
figure it out where it's coming from, and then they have like an audit layer of sorts for how they collected and where they collected and how this.
That's right.
Information were collected.
Yeah, so we have an event-based structure in KOSM that allows for data lineage to be tracked. Where did this data come from? Which system? Which, right? And so all this turns into like an audit layer by default.
Yeah.
Right, as well as an integration plane for all of these different resources, whether those are APIs from other websites or APIs from other applications like mobile apps, or large ERP or CRM systems like Salesforce, or data resources like Snowflake, or this new generation of LLMs. KOSM is designed to be this sort of smart hub that allows you to integrate these different data sources, connect them into our system, and then translate it through this HSML pipeline, and then have it operate on your data. Instead of just public data, it's designed to operate on your data. And these are agents that are then designed to provide, specific answers to your business, your life, not just sort of generic information that might have been called from the web.
Interesting. Okay, that's falling into place now. Slightly different. You have recently put out a news release with your automatic generating AIs, where sort of the AI generates new AI, and it's sort of, I don't know, is self-replicating? Is that a good term for it? Or can you explain that technology you're developing, and what does that mean?
Well, the way that ChatGPT and these other AIs, which are called generative AI for their ability to generate content like text or video or images or audio, as you mentioned, is, you essentially pour a box of receipts in there. Here's all this data from the web. You don't tell it how to sort through the data and make sense of it. There's an algorithm in there that does that, called a transformer. And then you might give it feedback, and say, that answer is wrong, this answer is right. And then while it's in the lab, then it learns how to sort of adjust its weights. And then when they ship it, like GPT-4, that's it, it's done. And it never learns a new thing. Now, people don't realize this, but this is more like me shipping you, like Encyclopedia Britannica 2021 edition. Here's 100 volumes. So whatever's in there, right? There's like an agent that can refer to all of the things in there, knows the relationships between all of them, and can basically give you general information about everything from currencies to cats. But it doesn't know anything about your cat, right? It just knows about cats in general. So these are frozen. So like ChatGPT, if you go to the homepage, it'll say has limited knowledge of the world after September 2021. Again, it's sort of like this is a printed encyclopedia, as opposed to something like Wikipedia, which, if you wanted to know, what the latest vote was on the debt ceiling, crisis in the United States, you could go to Wikipedia, and the latest information is likely there. And so that's a living, breathing network system, right? That is constantly, in a way, adapting to new information. So our system allows you to take your data, right? Your information from your company, structured, unstructured, multi-format, multimodal, IoT data, raw data, text, Excel spreadsheets, emails, and dump it into KOSM. And our system translates it into HSML. It's a different kind of pipeline where everything is explicitly modeled instead of this giant black box. Then from that data, what the patent says is that you can generate an AI agent that then learns that data and can also access general data resources from other public data sets, including LLMs or other things. So now you get the best of both worlds, except that you just built an AI by from your data. It was literally generated. So our pipeline in KOSM and the new patent essentially describes this process, which is completely opposite to the sort of large industrial process that the big guys have to do, which is why they need 10,000 computers and all these GPUs and all these NVIDIA chips to be able to operate it, because it is just so complex and so big. And ours is the exact opposite. In fact, when there's new data that you have, which every single day you and I generate new data, our agents are able to learn and adapt and reincorporate that. So they're learning dynamically, dynamic intelligence in real time, as opposed to essentially a giant, big frozen black box that is what is the state of the art today.
So essentially, instead of the universe, you're getting a small subset, your own private data in its own circled universe. And let's say it's customer data. You could type in, give me some information on Bob Smith or this kind of demographic within it, and it would just use the AI models to extract and interpret the data that's in your database, essentially.
That's right. In fact, KOSM hosts that now HSML structured data model as if it were a kind of AI designed database, like a database for AIs to interact with very quickly and very efficiently, rather than you and I. And the AI models today aren't really like a database. They're just this sort of big sort of statistical model that really no human can make any sense of. So it's that is a very good description that you just gave. And because of that, then this will allow businesses to ask personalized questions, right? Like the CFO might want to ask a different question than the VP of operations. We might want to ask a different question than the director of marketing. And you and I, in any aspect of our daily lives, have different questions about maybe what we're doing. What was the tone of my last email to so and so, right? Yeah. Give me a little sentiment analysis. Like, I'm working on something. I know I have a couple bookmarks related to this from last month, but I don't remember where they are. Can you just extract those and then give me a summary of that with the links? Oh, right. So imagine having this sort of externalized memory and the horsepower of computing with the AI's ability to understand the context under which you're operating. And what I really believe is happening here is that we're moving from the personal computing era, where the bulk of the effort of computing still has to come from humans, from you and I, right? We have to track everything and remember everything and remember which app and which system and which browser tab we were on 5 minutes ago, and the content and information, to the personalized computing era, where these new agents are doing that computing for you. They're remembering things on your behalf. They're proactively surfacing things relative to what you're doing. And this allows like that CFO and that COO and that CMO to be able to ask very specific questions in their own natural language and get an answer. What was my most expensive customer last month? Which product of theirs cost me the most money, right? Where is it located in which warehouse? How are we communicating? What is our, so all of these nuanced personalized questions can suddenly be surfaced when you have a new structure like this. And this is kind of what I mean by software 2.0. It's where computing starts to kind of meet us a little more closer to halfway than us having to do 80-90% of the work.
And I'm just thinking with your explainability technology, like if you're in a boardroom and just say, who's our 3 best customers? And Bob says, these guys are. But if you can't explain why they are, you have that layer in the AI to say, okay, who are our 3 best customers, and why do you define them as being our best customers? And then
that's right.
Data out of that, so it's sort of multi-dimensional or just deeper perspectives on the data, I guess.
And there's a reason for this, Martin, that's subtle but important. See, these large language models like ChatGPT and the rest, all they're doing is correlation. So they're looking at the most statistical likelihood. So if I say Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of, you nor the LLM will likely guess, Jell-O. You're going to go with water because of all the times that has been said on the web, it says water, right? And so birds fly, cars drive. Like these are statistically more likely to show up nearer to each other in a sentence. And that's why it's going to predict the sort of next word, next pixel, next sound or whatever. And so it's really this sort of law of averages. Now, that can be quite useful, but the problem is they don't understand is they don't have the ability to understand the causal underlying sort of principles of something. Like you and I understand basic physics, even my 2-year-old son understands it without knowing anything about the laws of physics. And as a result, whether we're picking up a cup of coffee, we're playing guitar in a jam session with friends, we're throwing a ball with the kids, or we're just merely trying to like dodge some crazy driver on the road, we translate from one domain to the next that underlying causal, those mechanisms. And correlation doesn't get you that. But the AIs that we train, we train them to understand those underlying causal mechanisms. That is part of what the new patent is based on that we just released, and also some new research on explainable AI. That then the explanation says like not just who are our most top 3 customers of last year, but who do you think they're going to be next year, and what's your reasoning for that? Right? Because what we really want is predictive, recommendations and stuff from these things, not just historical data. Databases are fairly good for that. We want good predictive stuff. And for that, the causal sort of fabric of understanding and reasoning and logic has to be baked in. And that's that extra step that our team, which is really comes from more from a neuroscience background than a computer science statistical modeling background, has modeled our agents on those sort of the biological structures that are capable of understanding the sort of causal reasoning and not just correlation. And so yes, you can, that explainability layer becomes increasingly important because it's more about what are the next decisions you're going to make based on what these things tell you. And that we need to establish trust that the underlying understandings of that, like understanding the laws of motion, can feed into that. That's what helped us get to the moon. Wasn't just, cavemen understood the laws of physics in the most basic level as we do today as individuals. But once we understood, the laws of motion, we could design things in entirely new ways to take advantage of that. And that's the type of promise that this new generation of software enables. Real breakthroughs in how we think of personalized computing, personal tutors that learn for every child what their strengths and weaknesses are, assistants for scientists that help them push through that breakthrough mile, or that act as personal assistants, not just for the CEO of the company, but maybe for everybody in the company. And that's the power of having something like in a software system in a digital format makes it very democratizable and highly scalable. So that's where this is leading.
Well, I guess with the explainability layer, it does a couple of things. I'm not just learning the data, it's spewing out at me. I can understand how it generated, and I can sort of learn myself, okay, these are the things that are correlated or help build that. And then it also lets me vet how the quality, I can take my human nature and say, if you're giving a credit score, but you're pulling out some weird sunspot statistical occurrences and
right.
That is like, okay, well, you're pulling out garbage data that just happens to be correlated to something else. So it helps us validate or verify how good we maybe think that data is.
Great example, because these large language models use this neural net architecture, and they do this thing called overfitting or underfitting, which is what you just mentioned, where if they're trying to tell whether or not there's a dog or a wolf in the picture. They found that, okay, well, it gets it right, say 96% of the time. But what they realized after some time was that when a wolf didn't have a scene where it had snow as a background, that it couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
Because it was not looking at the attributes of the animal, it was looking at the entire sort of environmental scene, and it was overfitting the value of snow.
Yeah.
Right, as opposed to most dogs weren't in the snow. So if dogs were in snow, then they're like, that's a wolf. And if wolves were in grass, then they thought that was a dog. And this is the kinds of things that go into why autonomous vehicles will crash into things that no 17-year-old kid would, because they don't really understand. They're just correlating. And even though that is a limited capability, it's still absolutely amazing. It's just not good enough for many of our most critical and important decisions. And certainly relative to guiding our lives and our businesses, I think that it becomes more high risk. Being able to generate some content that you can edit, being able to generate artwork or images, I think that it's a perfect use case for this. I think the work that we're doing is setting it up for applications that really extend beyond just generating content into context-aware applications that really help optimize everything from our personal lives, to our professional lives.
All right. Gabe, we've covered a lot of material here. I think it's time to wrap it up. Any final comments here before we call it a day?
Martin, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Right.
I think maybe just the final thought is that if, as an investor, if you're looking for exposure to this AI wave, which we think is just beginning, you've got a handful of vertical players that are quite interesting, and then you've got big tech guys where you're not going to see significant multiples, although I'm sure they're kind of doing just add AI to whatever their current products are. I would argue that Versus is the only one positioned as a horizontal pure play AI company in the public space, with that kind of horizontal growth opportunities that you typically only see in a venture capital backed Silicon Valley startup. And really that is our DNA. We're from Silicon Valley. We're our tech guys that grew up here in California. But we happen to be in the public markets because we felt that the public would be a better partner with us than the VCs, given the goals that we had as a company. So I think that this provides a really unique opportunity for public to invest in the new wave of technology without having to be a venture capital company, when you can't get access to those small startups or the mid-sized startups that they're investing in, with the advantages of liquidity. Even the VCs have to wait 7-8 years to get those winners over the line into the public markets themselves, and we've seen that's where the unicorns bloom. But I think this is a very unique opportunity in the form of Versus, because I think that you get that sort of opportunity for those kinds of multiples while still having the sort of de-risking value of liquidity, which not even the VCs have. I would argue that's a pretty nice blend.
All right. Thanks a lot, Gabe. Thanks for the update. A great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Martin. Have a good day.